Hey everyone, Miv here, and welcome to my Completionist playthrough of Icewind Dale, done in a Purist style, on insane difficulty. I'll need to think of a better introduction. Still, the time has finally come to begin the gameplay, but before that, a quick recap. We are indeed playing on insane difficulty, with the additional experience turned off, as well as a bunch of other settings and rules to make things more interesting and fun. And as for our party, it consists of a human paladin, a dwarf cleric, an elf druid, a halfling fighter thief, a half-elf bard, and a human invoker. These characters were clearly not made the optimal way, and that was done on purpose. If you'd like to learn more about that, or any other topic related to this playthrough, feel free to check out the introduction video to this series and take a look in its description for the detailed timestamps to navigate between all the subjects covered there. And a final word about that episode is that I was touched by the amazing reaction you've had towards it. Thank you for all the comments and kind words, and your interest in this playthrough. Your enthusiasm for it is not lost on me, and I will do my best to meet your expectations. But now, let's get to it, especially since there's plenty to showcase, even in this very tavern. We will stay here for a while, but first let's heed Hrothgar's advice we received in our initial conversation with him, to get ourselves some drinks to shake off the cold of the road, as he suggested. So for that, we can approach Grisella. Unfortunately, the NPCs in Icewind Dale are not voiced in any way, but if they were, I imagine a very appropriate line for Grisella here would be the one that Patricia from the Seven Dales from Baldur's Gate 2 used to grace us with, the classic, "Hello!" That's how I imagine Grisella greeted us just now.
Hello!
This also gives me an opportunity to explain how I will handle conversations in this run. I know there are people who prefer all dialogues being read out loud, and there's also a group on the opposite end who would like all of them skipped. I will employ a hybrid approach, where I will read the most important conversations and my favorite ones in their entirety, but the more inconsequential and forgettable dialogues, I will summarize what they are about while clicking through them. Not too quickly, so as to give you a chance to pause at any moment, to read everything in detail on your own, which I would recommend, as this game is well written for the most part. I hope this will be a functional compromise to keep up the pace, especially in these early segments of the game, where a large amount of dialogues is condensed right at the start. Later on, where conversations are a lot more rare, I will probably read more of them proportionately, but here in our first episode, things will be slow enough anyway, with all of the usual explanations and start of the run management, getting our bearings and all that. So whatever your preference is, I hope you will understand, and I hope it will work out just fine for everyone. So here, whenever we express our willingness to get some beverages, Grisella will be somewhat hesitant to offer us any, but when pressed with some questions, she will eventually reveal that there's some kind of a bug infestation in the cellar blocking access to her stock. So in a classic RPG fashion, our first quest will be about pest removal. You might remember from Baldur's Gate 1, one of our first quests in Candlekeep involved killing some rats, and here we'll have to exterminate some beetles. So have no fear, madam, I shall see to it that the pests down below trouble you no further. So we will get on to this heroic task, but first we need to check out our inventory and take a look at a few things. First off, our starting gold amount seems to be around 600, which is a pretty good roll, on the higher end of average. It's usually between 500 and 600 for most full parties, and how it works is that it's a sum of all of our characters' gold rolls. Each character at the start of the game makes a roll from a certain gold bracket, which depends on their class. And the warrior classes, having the highest need for gear and the ability to equip the widest variety, have the largest potential there, while wizards, being the least gear reliant and least able to utilize equipment, get the smallest bracket. And the overall spread between the total minimum and maximum is quite large, but barring some anomalies, it's usually around where we are, so I'm satisfied with that, as every penny will matter a great deal, especially in the beginning. We also need to equip ourselves with those starting quarterstaves to give ourselves access to lethal damage, because if we were to fight unarmed with our bare hands, we would only be able to knock our opponents out, and we of course need to eliminate them permanently. Also, our opponents attacking us in melee would then receive a +4 Thaco and a +4 damage bonus against us. So we always want to have some weapon brandished to deprive our enemies of that advantage. We don't have to be proficient with it. Proficiency only matters for offensive purposes. But while we're on the topic of such bonuses and penalties, a similar one involves having a ranged weapon out while being attacked in melee. The attacker will enjoy a +4 Thaco and a +4 damage bonus as well in Icewind Dale specifically. That damage bonus is not present in Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition, just in the originals, I think. But here, it's exactly like attacking an unarmed target. And additionally, trying to attack anything in melee with a ranged weapon will be burdened by a -8 Thaco penalty. And these rules are universal, by the way, so they apply to both us and our enemies. And while there are hardly any unarmed foes, because I'm not counting commoners here, sending someone to attack an archer up front is always beneficial to make them have to either switch to a melee weapon or have to retreat or have to fight with those penalties in play. And finally, there's also a +4 Thaco boost a character gets when attacking out of the shadows or out of invisibility. That bonus affects all attacks, not just backstabs, even though it pertains the most often, I guess, towards them, towards thieves and being able to land those backstabs more regularly. All right, anyway, with all those explanations done, we can get down there and get down to business. Although, I think before we start fighting, I'm going to highlight yet another unique thing about Icewind Dale, which is the sheer amount of the elements of the environment that we can inspect. Here, of course, we are familiar with that kind of cursor changing to a question mark from Baldur's Gate, especially Baldur's Gate 2, where it was present here and there. But in Icewind Dale, you'll see that we can take a closer look at far, far more of our surroundings and get their descriptions. And this is an important immersion mechanic, but also a storytelling device sometimes, because from these observations, we can get certain clues or be able to piece some information together. So of course I will click on most of them and leave their descriptions on the screen so that you can read them in detail on your own, but sometimes I will point your attention to them whenever they contain some relevant info. But anyway, here we can spread out and deal with those beetles, those creepy crawlies and nasties, as Grisella called them. Hopefully we can avoid any unpleasant surprises, because these beetles are not always passive, but they can actually fight back and deal some damage. Even though you might not have experienced that ever in your life, because they have pretty bad Thaco, but they can deal 2d4 damage, and of course with our settings we would receive double of what they roll. Fortunately, nothing like that happened. No unfortunate, unnecessary healing spells needed to be used, and we emerge victorious and can report our success to Grisella once we resolve this pathfinding issue here. Jeez, guys. You need to be more focused here. This is a bad omen for the rest of the playthrough if you're going to behave like that. Anyway, Grisella, of course, is going to be ecstatic to hear that these bugs are no more and will reward us with 5 gold. A start to our fortune. And we're also going to get 1200 experience, which is the standard amount for any early game quest-like activities in Icewind Dale. And with that quest finished, also the tavern services are now operational. So after working up a sweat, beating up those beetles, I guess maybe Galburin could take a swig of some strong dwarven ale. Well, maybe not dwarven ale, let's get this Grisella special so that we don't spend all of our gold immediately. But since this didn't activate any rumors, maybe also Iris could take maybe a glass of wine, a drink more up her alley. And yes, now we see that, of course, while having some drinks, we can overhear some rumors or maybe talk to other patrons or the bartender and get some rumors here, and pieces of information that increase our immersion, because they usually describe some events going on in the world or just give us some background to Icewind Dale or just in general the world that we are in, and because of course this is a mechanic that's also present in Baldur's Gate. So just some info that we can usually learn of from different sources, but just gives us a better idea of what's going on and where we are at. And now we are going to explore all of the unique conversations that the townspeople, the commoners, can give us here in Easthaven. Now, they are based on race primarily, but also include one class, special conversation. However, whenever we approach with someone that doesn't have any traits that stand out and doesn't offer any unique dialogue options, like our human paladin here, we're just going to experience the standard conversation where we can get some information about Easthaven, get some basic directions, like where's the shop, where the temple is, that kind of thing. You can actually click this quite a few times. Eventually, we are also going to hear about some kind of messenger from a town called Kuldahar, who apparently collapsed at the doorstep of the temple. And apparently, Hrothgar and Everard might know something more about that. Hrothgar, of course, we've met in in the end of the last episode. Hrothgar gave us the Welcome to Icewind Dale conversation, and Everard is the chief priest here at the temple, whom we will meet later. We can also ask about any other interesting places, kind of getting to know a little bit about the knucklehead trout, which is the very valuable fish being fished out in the lake here, and not really for its nutritional purposes, I guess, but the little bones, the scrimshaw, that can be carved into jewelry or ornaments and all that kind of stuff, which is the main export good from Easthaven here. Also, we can hear about the weather being unusually bad these days. And finally, I think we will be able to also hear about some kind of expedition that Hrothgar is organizing to launch from Easthaven to somewhere else. Apparently this is the big event, the talk of the town. And yeah, so that's the standard conversation. And whenever we've talked to someone like that, he's going to be kind of unavailable for any more special conversations going forward. So we are going to have to pester somebody else, and eventually we'll go through all of these, all of these guys. We're going to badger them for some conversations. But I think, you know what, not Galburin, but first, being in the tavern, it is only appropriate to start out with the bard conversation. That's the only class-based one. And as you can see, the commoner here already noticed that he's dealing with a minstrel. He is right, of course. Iris is a passionate artist being serious about her craft, so she will not shy away from where this conversation is headed about the different tales that she wants to make out of her journeys, but she can already perform some kind of tale. And I guess maybe after a few sips of that wine, she's in a singing mood, or perhaps this is a recitation of some kind of verse that she can do. And apparently it was very well received, and this townsperson will reward her with a gem that he promised to pass on to a worthy musician. So that's the bard conversation. Kind of cool, giving the bard an ability to perform what they are meant to do. Some songs or recitations and whatnot. And here we have received a moonstone gem, quite a notable gem when it comes to the lore, but in the gameplay, here what matters is that we can sell this gem for 25 gold here, or for 30 gold a little bit later. And I'm usually going to, I think, tell the different prices of gems that we obtain here in the beginning, because it will involve a decision that we'll have to make, whether we want to sell these gems here or hold on to them and only sell them later. But I think I will discuss that at a later point. All right, so now let's kind of go in order, I guess, through these race-based conversations, starting with Galburin. We, of course, see another dwarf. By the way, in original Icewind Dale, we wouldn't be able to see the name Hildreth Highhammer here, but it would just say dwarf, and only through the conversation we would be able to know the name of this person. But anyway, we see in the corner of our eye on the other side of the tavern some kind of dwarven person also visiting Easthaven, and she will be referenced in this conversation. And of course, all of these race-based conversations are referring to the fact that Easthaven is a remote, small fishing village, not exactly a cosmopolitan community that would be overly familiar with members of other races. So of course, any non-human visiting the place is quite an attraction and kind of a novelty, sparking some gossips and rumors. So yes, here we already know that there's been a dwarf visiting in recent times, Hildreth. apparently it's easy to confuse her with being a dude, because apparently she sports a luscious beard. And you will see that actually in our conversation with Hildreth, we can make that exact mistake. However, this townsperson will be convinced about our dwarf here being in the area for the purpose of doing some kind of launching an expedition to some old cities of the dwarves. It gives us a name for a supposed dwarven clanhold in the area, Dorn's Deep, which of course will spark Galburin's interest, but he will hope that what this person says is not true, because he will claim that this hold already fell to the goblins and orcs, some sort of horde, and there are only some treasures that could be scavenged from there now. And this is something that Galburin wouldn't really say seriously, but I have to engage in this conversation option because it has a surprising follow-up much later in the game that we of course have to see in our completionist playthrough. Maybe a role-playing justification for it could be that Galburin by this point is kind of tired of speaking to this person and just wants him to leave him alone. So he's going to be like, yeah, sure, expedition. I'm totally going there. Yeah, just leave me alone. And apparently this townsperson will make an investment to support our expedition, hoping for some kind of a return of this secret dwarven expedition here once we return. So yeah, sure. Let's just take our leave here. And Galburin already received another gem, an Andar gem this time, worth 15 gold here or 18 gold a little bit later. So already by just doing these 2 quick conversations, we've basically gained 40 or almost 50 gold, depending on when we're going to cash in those profits. Anyway, the Elven conversation. By the way, this starting line where they notice that they're speaking to a non-human, there's usually 2 or 3 of those that they just randomly roll, which one they're going to give us. But here, of course, as well, there's already an elf apparently visiting Easthaven, staying at the Snowdrift Inn, having some sort of enchanted blade, seems like an adventurer of some sort, air vein or something. So that's about all that we can learn from this conversation. Just, you know, having something to investigate, an interesting rumor about an elf being already in Easthaven. We're going to check that out later. And finally, the halfling conversation here will reference some kind of a different caravan merchant that visits Easthaven on occasion, usually traveling through the Kuldahar Pass. Kuldahar Pass, I should say. Yeah, and we get even more information about Kuldahar, apparently some kind of a big tree town to the south. All right, we'll investigate in due time. In due time, my lord. Oh, Jesus Christ. Couldn't resist making a dork out of myself, as always. You will, for any new viewers, you will see that this is par for the course in my videos. Anyway, those are all the race-based conversations, the unique dialogues from the townspeople that we can explore. But of course, I mentioned in the intro video that we don't have a gnome, and gnomes have a conversation just like these ones, where the gnome in question will be kind of confused with or taken for another kind of well-known inventor, some kind of a quirky person known in these parts by the name of Oswald Fiddlebender, giving us another name to kind of investigate perhaps in the future. But anyway, now the last thing we need to do in here is talk to Hildreth, and I'm going to do it with a non-dwarf, because only non-dwarves can make this possible mistake here of taking Hildreth for a guy because of that beard. But we already know that Hildreth is a lady, and we shall not make such a faux pas, and we'll just progress the conversation normally. So the main thing we can get out of this conversation is that she will mention the expedition Hrothgar is putting together, but she will also mention that Hrothgar apparently is a valiant man and known to be a wise leader. So this expedition is very unlikely to be some kind of a foolish quest, but a well set up opportunity for adventurers like Hildreth, who will join this expedition. So I guess we can give her a nice farewell. Also, something about Hrothgar being a good leader was referenced in Baldur's Gate 2 because, of course, Hrothgar had an axe named after him when we visited Joluf, the Icewind Dale kind of vendor, and that axe had charisma and wisdom on it, kind of referencing his traits of character, even though such stats on an axe were pretty confusing when it comes to gameplay mechanics. But anyway, now finally we can leave this tavern. Nothing more to explore here for us. But as we step out, I will be quiet for a few moments so that we can enjoy the amazing Easthaven musical theme.
I'm listening. I'll handle it. I'm here. Ready. Agreed.
Oh my god, the strength of will it took for me to not start singing along there, as I usually do when I play on my own. The sacrifices I make, man. In the meantime, I guess Rintar observed these kids kind of pestering this poor squirrel, maybe trying to, you know, instruct these kids to build a snowman or something instead, instead of stressing out this poor squirrel. Hear that, Jeffy? Don't be so mean to this poor animal. But anyway, the first order of business I always do is go straight to Pomab's Emporium so that we can equip ourselves and then carry on with any other tasks. And here again, we will have quite a few different descriptions of the environment that we can check out. A lot of these descriptions are the same between certain objects, like all of these shelves will have the same one, so I'm not going to click on, you know, every little thing that we could here because this is the same description. But yeah, from here again you can see that in Icewind Dale we can really take a look at a lot of stuff. Now when it comes to this conversation with Pomab, I think we will conduct it with Bray. It will fit better, fit her temperament better, because of course she is a pretty hot-tempered lass that will have no patience for an obnoxious character like Pomab. We've of course heard already some words of caution about him from Hrothgar. He warned us about Pomab being a no-good, callous-eyed, greedy weasel. I'll already de-equip these quarterstaves, by the way. And actually, let's give them to one character so that we can sell them nicely and quickly. But yes, the conversation. Pomab will reveal himself to be quite rude. I guess we can give him the benefit of the doubt at the very beginning of this conversation. But he will try to press his luck, calling us smelly and barbaric. How dare you speak to me in such a manner? He will try to insinuate himself as some kind of an important personage. Yeah, Pomab Ak Azmir, Royal Diplomatic Envoy of Kalimshan and appointed Overseer of the Northern Caravan Routes. And here what's important about this moment in the conversation is that, of course, here we have some pretty clear-cut conversation options, like, you know, being sarcastic and mocking him. But this apology works differently depending on your charisma. If you have 15 or more charisma, this will actually calm him down. He will accept this apology as an act of our goodwill and calm down a little bit. But if we are, if the person talking has 14 or less charisma, he will take it as an insult and will not accept this apology. So this can kind of be interpreted in two ways, I think. It's either a genuine apology that will only convince him if we deliver it in a charismatic, convincing way, or this is a sarcastic remark that if you are charismatic enough, you can deliver in such a way that he won't even notice that he's being mocked. But anyway, Bray will say this: your appearance as a lowly shopkeeper is just a clever disguise to throw off any would-be assassins. Am I right? Yeah, a diplomatic envoy. But it's more likely that Pomab was probably exiled or banished for some transgressions. Oh, maybe let's even go with this one. That would suit Bray better. Anyway, farewell, your royalness. Bray will have no more of that kind of talk, but now the more level-headed stoic Rintar will step in to smooth the relations between our party members and Pomab, because of course we want to engage in some trading with him. First, before we inspect the usual basic goods he has for early game equipping, let's just take a look at these containers. It's really nice that we can get all 3 types already at the very beginning of the game. The gem bag is as cheap as it gets, but the scroll case and potion bag can be obtained even here in Easthaven for a slightly cheaper price. If you only want to have 1 copy of those, we can buy them for 9 gold from someone slightly more pleasant, I guess, to be around than Pomab. But I am going to get them because I like to have quite a few containers to sort my stuff nicely. And there's also this bottle of wine for 2 gold, and this actually has a different description from all the other bottles of wine that we will be able to find later in the game, because this is a quest item. We'll not get it though, and I guess in our first visit here, let's actually get some arrows already and some darts. They are cheap and we need a lot of them. Now let's just do some basic equipping here. I'm actually going to give some darts to Bray, even though they will be a main ranged weapon for Asathi. And Bray, of course, will focus on shooting her short bow soon. I guess Rintar can also keep some of those arrows in his quiver. But anyway, when it comes to the purchases I'm going to make here, I will think for a moment on what exactly I want to get, and I will be back in a moment. And we're back. I'm going to scroll through the list to let you see all of the selections I've made, as well as the prices for individual items. Of course, they would be a little bit cheaper if we've had a party leader with 18 charisma instead of just 17, but we're still getting a 10% discount. And in general, as you can see, I'm spending quite frugally, making some notable omissions, perhaps, on things that it would normally make sense to purchase here. However, there are 2 reasons why I'm skipping certain items. And for some reason, I wasn't able to get all of the bullets I wanted in one go. But anyway, for certain items, they are not as necessary as they might seem. And for others, we are either guaranteed to get them for free, or at least we will have a chance to get them at no additional charge. Gratis, as some would say. Let me just distribute these items where they are supposed to go. And we will be able to move on in just a moment. Also, taking a look at Rintar's encumbrance, I can explain why I only got 5 of these throwing axes for him. Of course, they are quite heavy, especially in larger numbers. But what's interesting in Icewind Dale specifically is that these throwing daggers have no weight associated with them. So they are a much more convenient option than they were in Baldur's Gate. But anyway, after that conversation with Pomab, we were left with quite a negative impression of him. And he is, of course, not the only example of a person who hates being here up north in the harsh, cold climate. We will meet more like him in that regard. But in a true RPG fashion, we sense something off about him, as if there's some greater evil hiding underneath his demeanor. So discreetly, Rintar is going to use his Detect Evil ability and confirm that Pomab is indeed evil. And of course, by itself, this doesn't condemn him, but it might prompt our party members to maybe take a closer look around his shop, trying to spot something suspicious hiding somewhere, and that will lead Bray to discover this staircase. And I don't want to speak for anyone, I never do, but I can certainly admit that this staircase I didn't notice on my first playthrough. It was only later that I discovered that there's something worth our attention here. And perhaps that's also an experience some of you might relate to, because this is maybe not that hidden, but somehow, I don't know, it escaped my notice for quite a while. And this is actually a really important staircase. So of course, while snooping around, Bray is going to sneak up there to see what she can find, and here being in Pomab's private chambers, she will find quite some treasures that she will, of course, feel not the least bit guilty for taking from Pomab. But anyway, this is a really important room because in these 2 containers, well, in this one we get some decent gems, and also a high quality dagger. This is just a non-magical dagger with a +1 Thaco bonus. We are going to find quite a few of these high quality weapons during our adventures. And also these gems, they sell for 105 gold here, or I think 128 a little bit later. So anyway, we might give Bray this as her melee option for now, but this container over here contains some really notable stuff. We have 3 scrolls and a potion of healing. And of course this reflected image is an addition coming from the enhanced edition, so we will not take it with us, being purists, although it could sell for 50 gold here or even 80 gold a little bit later, so that's a bit of a shame. But anyway, here we have also Sleep and Chromatic Orb, very important spells for us. Now, when it comes to talking about spells in more detail, about their mechanics and their differences between how they work in Icewind Dale and how they did work in Baldur's Gate, I think I will cover that as we are about to use a particular spell. We will analyze it and then see it in action immediately after. That will spare us some lengthy expositions about spells that are not relevant at the moment. But when it comes to Sleep, I have to mention, of course, something that I've also brought up in the intro episode, is that, of course, this spell doesn't really work after the prologue, because 99% of our opponents are going to be either level 5 or higher, or they will be innately immune to this Sleep status effect. So we can only use it here in the prologue, and that brings a certain decision before us. We could either just save this scroll to use it in a certain encounter once, to have one guaranteed use directly from the scroll, or we could attempt to learn it to have a few more uses, basically 3 uses over the course of the prologue. And I think that's a worthy chance to take here with Iris. And she, of course, with only 16 intelligence, will only have a 70% chance of learning the spell successfully, which is, still more than 2 out of 3. But it is a bit of a risk, but she is not averse to that kind of stuff. She is a risk taker, and after uttering a quick prayer to Timora, she will attempt to scribe this spell into her spellbook. And whew, it was a success. So this one time that we were going to do some scribing just raw without using any intelligence boosters, because there aren't any in the prologue, fortunately we made it. Of course, she doesn't have any memorization slots yet, being a level 1 bard, but before we venture out to do some more notable encounters, she will be level 2 and later on level 3 to have 1 and then 2 spell memorization slots for level 1 respectively. So she will be able to contribute in battles using Sleep, and then we can give this Chromatic Orb to Nadimastria, who, of course, with 18 intelligence has a base 85% chance to successfully learn spells, and of course, as an invoker, enjoys the additive 15% further bonus when scribing spells from the evocation or invocation school. So of course she will be able to learn Chromatic Orb without any risk of failing, which then of course completes her nice starting selection that I discussed in the intro episode. All right, finally, before we leave here, let's just get rid of these quarter staves that I've noticed we still had. 5 more gold. We're, of course, looking to be frugal. You'll see various trading optimizations as we go through the game. Also, we might stash these gems into our bag. We might sort our stuff a little bit nicer and give this potion of healing to Rintar. And when looking at the time, it sure does fly when playing this game. Oh man. But without making this episode too long, perhaps we can still take care of one cool side quest that has something very interesting about it, and even some action to offer. So let's go straight there, past Jonan and all the others. We will get back to you in the next episode, guys. But here all we want to do is find Apsel, whom we actually heard about from that rumor at the tavern, him being a scrimshander who saw some goblins in the vicinity. But here again we will conduct this conversation with Bray because he will have something interesting to say to her. He's apparently quite relieved to see somebody come up because he is in quite a predicament. Apparently a wolf found its way into his workshop, but he managed to lock the beast inside, although he accidentally broke the key off in the lock while trying to get away. And of course, yes, we can confirm that he is indeed a Scrimshander. And of course, he will want us to get rid of that wolf somehow so he can get back to work. But in response to this conversation option, when we ask, how am I supposed to get the door open if you broke the key off in the lock? To any other class, he would respond with just, I don't care, break it down if you have to. And that would be pretty much it. But seeing how Bray is a thief, he is also going to add, judging by the looks of you, I'd say you've picked more than your share of locks. My door shouldn't be much of a challenge. So yes, this is quite a tutorial introducing us to locked doors and stuff like that. This door actually requires 17 strength to bash open, so none of our weaklings would be able to deal with it, as you can see. But its lockpicking difficulty is only 25, so we will have no problem there. And before we step in there, let's actually activate Iris's song to already have the +1 Thaco and damage boost coming from the Ballad of Three Heroes. Let's just make sure that we do have that buff active, because unfortunately we will have to resort to violence. Here's the villain, the wolf, who apparently just wanted to chew on some bones, get some new toys. Oh man, I hate when games make me do that. Fight wolves and such creatures. And then there's of course a million things to inspect as well. But what's interesting here is that if you're like me and you hate when games pit us against creatures like that, the good news is that you don't necessarily have to kill the wolf to get rid of it. A cool, lesser-known outcome here involves charming the animal. And whenever that happens, an in-game cutscene will occur where we lose control for a moment, showing the wolf leaving the workshop peacefully. And it's only really accessible, realistically accessible, if you have a ranger, though, giving this traditionally underwhelming class, let's say, a brief moment in the spotlight, because they have their innate ability, Charm Animal, available to them right from level 1. And the other early game way to charm the wolf would be through the level 2 druid spell Charm Person or Mammal. But even if you leave this quest until the very last moment before progressing the game out of Easthaven, reaching level 3 on a druid to access that spell is impossible in a full party without XP bonuses enabled. You need either that or a smaller team, because with a 6-man group, you will not be anywhere close to level 3 on the druid, even with every little bit of experience you can possibly get. So unfortunately here we will have to do things the hard way. And normally, of course, it's a very easy fight. It takes about 5 seconds with normal attacks, but seeing as how our party isn't exactly up to that kind of standard, we'll have to resort to some spells, or a single spell. We have this Sunscorch prepared on our druid, and this will already give us a glimpse of how much improved the druidic spells are in Icewind Dale. This spell deals fire damage, which is very good in Icewind Dale, because a lot of creatures are susceptible to it, and some are even vulnerable to it, and will take more damage from this type. It also scales with level. It can blind the target if they don't make their save, and it's more effective against undead, dealing more damage to them. So one heck of a spell, considering it's just level 1, and especially a little bit later on, when those level 1 memorization slots become more abundant and more expendable, you can just memorize a bunch of those and throw them around without calculating each use. So quite a good deal here that we will use on this wolf. And then send everybody else to, well, maybe let's use ranged attacks, and just Rintar will step forward. He has the best armor class, and of course we want to kind of limit the incoming damage, especially now that this wolf is blinded. Although he can stumble, as you can see, he can stumble into characters that will appear in his vision then, if he gets very close to them. But fortunately we did manage to deal with it, although we will be quite sad about the fact that he had to die. Wolfie, no! But we can take solace that at least Apsel will now be able to get back to business, and will reward us with 25 gold, a special dagger of his, and we of course get the 1200 experience. This dagger, besides the name and description, is no different than a high-quality dagger, just non-magical weapon with +1 Thaco bonus, and I guess we can give that as a melee option to Iris. And I think this will be it for this episode. We will get things underway in the next one. Probably finish up those side quests, get started on the main storyline, and yeah, get to some more adventuring then. But for now, I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time.